You are listening to Torah Treasures, a messianic perspective on the weekly Torah portion, featuring Rabbi Jason Sobel.
This week's Torah portion is Parasha Shmini, Leviticus 9:1 through 11:47. What is the spiritual value and meaning found in keeping kosher, the Jewish dietary laws? Why were the laws of kashrut, kosher, placed in the context of the inauguration of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, in this week's Parsha? Jewish scholars and sages have offered a variety of explanations as to the purpose and spiritual significance of the Jewish dietary laws known as kashrut. In general, these varied explanations can be summarized as historical, medical, or ethical and moral. The proponents of the historical theory have primarily been anthropologists and historians. They argue that the ancient Israelites adopted the pagan practices of their neighbors in regard to clean and unclean animals. Other ancient religions, such as Zoroastrianism, an ancient religion of Persia, believed that their clean and unclean animals represented good and evil. This view, however, is based in a type of dualism rooted in the belief that there are two equal and opposing forces in the world that are constantly in conflict with one another, a viewpoint that does not correlate with the biblical worldview. A second popular theory is that the laws of kashrut were given for medical reasons. Their purpose is to promote the physical well-being of the children of Israel. God meant to ensure the mental and physical health of the Jewish people so they would have the necessary vitality to study and serve the Lord. This view was held by the great Jewish scholar and physician Maimonides, also known as the Rambam. Although this view seems logical, some arguments against this view are as follows. Number one, many non-Jews eat things like pork and shellfish and are as healthy or have better health than Jews who keep kosher. Number two, if the physical well-being of the Jewish people was the primary reason for kashrut, why are poisonous herbs and other harmful foods not included in the list of prohibited foods? Number three, the result of eating animals that are not kosher is spiritual contamination, in Hebrew known as tumah, and not physical disorders according to the Torah. The most common view accepted by the majority of classical Jewish commentators is the moral or ethical theory of kashrut. The following is an example of this position as found in Midrash Tanchuma. Since the Israelites cleave to the omnipresent and are therefore worthy of being alive, accordingly, God separated them from uncleanness and decreed commandments upon them. For the other nations, however, God prohibited nothing. This is comparable to a physician who went to visit a patient who was incurable and allowed him to eat anything he wished, whereas when he went to his patient who was to recover, the physician imposed restrictions on his diet that would ensure that the recoverable patient would live. So too the nations in Israel. The primary underlying principle here, according to the rabbis, is that certain foods have the ability to harm and pollute the soul, thereby dulling a person's moral and ethical sensitivity. Though I do agree that eating non-kosher meat has spiritual ramifications for a Jewish person, I do not, however, believe that any animal is intrinsically impure and capable of defiling the soul in and of itself. If this were the case, it would mean that a non-Jew who eats non-kosher meat, and even if they are a follower of Messiah, could never achieve as high a spiritual level as a Torah-observant Messianic Jew. Both the New Covenant, as found in Acts 15, and my personal experience refutes this position. How then does keeping the laws of kashrut sanctify a Jewish person, and eating treif, non-kosher meat, makes someone spiritually impure, tameh. In order to understand this, we must understand the context in which these dietary laws appear. The laws of kashrut are first mentioned in this week's Torah portion, in the context of the inauguration of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and in the midst of the laws pertaining to priestly service. But why should these laws that apply to all Israel appear in this context? We need to remember that the Mishkan is meant to be a partial return to the Garden of Eden. Architectural aspects of its design point to the fact that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was meant to be a mini, portable Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. Examples include the menorah, the 7-branch candelabra, that was reminiscent of the tree of life, and the cherubim that were engraved on the curtain that guarded the way into God's presence. Furthermore, everything that made a person ritually impure and thus prohibited them from entering worship and serving in the Mishkan were in some ways connected to the fall and the subsequent curse. Anything associated with death, such as touching a body that was dead, menstruation, which is connected to the loss of a potential life, and certain skin diseases and deformities all made a person tameh, ritually impure. Since all of these things were connected to the fall, they were not allowed into the Mishkan. But how is eating non-kosher meat connected to the fall? The sin of Adam and Eve involved eating. In other words, their eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a quest for wisdom apart from God. Stephen Bailey beautifully elaborates on this point when he writes, "The knowledge of good and evil is the knowledge of moral judgment. What is good and what is bad? The first fundamental principle of the relationship between God the Creator and the human, his creation, is that God alone is the source of moral judgment of good and evil. For the human being to be as God, knowing good and evil, means that the human usurps from God the source which is considered good and what is considered evil." Based upon these insights, the reason why the laws of kashrut have the power to make us holy or defile is that they offer us the opportunity to trust and obey, and thereby correct the mistake humankind made in the Garden of Eden. Every time a Jew chooses to abstain from what God says is unfit to eat, they demonstrate that they have learned from the mistake made in Eden and further the process of their spiritual refinement and that of the Jewish people and the entire world through their obedience. After all, Torah is called a tree of life, and all who cling to it and the one who embodies it fully, Messiah Yeshua, find the life of paradise.